Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're just going to wait for the room to fill up. So bear with us just a moment. All right, so I would make sure you grab a drink, get comfy, because we've got two great talks lined up for us from both Sander and Ko. And yeah, let's get things kicked off. Ko's already got his drink. Great, nice preparation. I also heard there's going to be some eating in between as well, just to get some extra energy for his presentation. So you're in for a good one. So yeah, welcome to the Scaling Java Development Picnic Meetup. With me, Phil, Sander, and Ko. Sander and Ko are going to be giving us some great presentations today. And some of you may actually know that we tried running this very same meetup back in, let's say, the real world in March. But you may have heard of this thing called coronavirus that came along and spoiled the plans, unfortunately. So we've been putting this one off because we really thought this deserved a stage, the lights, the camera, and the action. But now we realize that actually it's too good of a presentation to stave off any longer. So we put it on Zoom. And yeah, well, actually, we've been doing quite a few meetups recently on Zoom. You may have actually seen a couple of them. So last year we brought you topics around how we're scaling up our infrastructure and our backend during the coronavirus pandemic. So I swear that's the last time I'm going to mention coronavirus. And we also had some talks with some tech celebs, such as the ones who, such as Basil from Project Reactor, who is a project lead there. And yeah, we also had some other great presentations as well. So I would urge you all to check them out, sign up to the meetup page if you haven't already. And there will be many more to come. So yeah, we've talked about the challenges we face at Picnic, also the tech that we're building. So we had a presentation recently about what future products that we're building in Picnic for automated fulfillment centers and so on. And we also talked about what components we use to build this technology. So we covered that base, but up until now, we've kind of left one of the crucial pieces of the puzzle missing, and that is about developer tooling. So today we wanted to bring you two more great presentations, and this time exactly around Java development tooling. And so to kick off, we have our very own Sander Mak, who's a tech lead at Picnic, who's going to be talking about how we scale Java development in-house. And he will share some of the challenges that we've encountered when scaling up not only our tech landscape, but also the tooling around it and how we actually scale up development teams and how we retain a high quality of code standards, despite the fact that we're growing to an ever larger team size. Then after that, we have Turk Ko, Ko Turk, sorry, who's going to talk, who's coming from Blue for IT, who's going to talk about some of the really interesting problems that I share actually a lot of sympathy with, and that's around the fact of using someone else's IDE, that it can be both an infuriating and also a highly intriguing process. So if you mob program, whether that's these days over Zoom, you can imagine, you can definitely relate to the fact that using all different kinds of key combinations are different on everyone's computers. But what Ko is going to talk about is actually giving us some of the best tricks and tips to make our development lives more efficient, whilst also making us look like coding deities. So without further ado, I want to hand over the stage to Sander, who's going to talk about scaling development at Picnic. And Sander, yeah, please take it away.
Thanks a lot, Phil. So first I'm going to share my screen, obviously. There we go. All right, so also a very warm welcome from my side. As Phil said, we at Picnic definitely are growing. We experience a lot of growth, both on the system side as well as on the development side. So tonight I would like to share with you a few insights and a few things that we learned along the way. And hopefully that will also be very useful to you. And let's see if that's actually the case. But before I dive into the technology and dive into what we actually did in terms of systems and processes and development, I want to talk a little bit about the context that we're in, which I call the Online Groceries Challenge. After that, we'll look at how we scale our systems more from a perspective of the scalability and performance aspect. And then, most importantly, I'm going to zoom in on development tooling and what we do there in terms to scale our teams and enable them and give them a environment to indeed achieve both high velocity, but also high quality, and just something to have a lot of things in place to ensure that we can make this happen without causing too much pain to the teams and to the individual developers. So before we move there, let's see what's actually the challenge that we're facing. Because if you think about it, grocery deliveries is currently exploding, but it's not that new of a concept, right? To get your groceries at home. Look at this picture. I mean, even maybe 100 years ago, people were already getting their groceries delivered at home. And in fact, if you look at the numbers, then you can see that in the 70s, for example, 70% of the milk was actually delivered at home. But something changed, because around the 90s, this has dropped to about 0%. So somewhere along the way, this thing called a supermarket happened. And we all got up at Saturday morning, we go in our cars, we drive to the same supermarket, we use our precious time to pick all the groceries that we want, and then we cart them home ourselves. And in a sense, it is about efficiency. It is also a little bit about having much more to choose from, rather than just single milkman driving along the route. And in the Netherlands, we had a similar sort of shift. So there was this concept called SRV, where you also got your groceries right at your doorstep, which ultimately didn't make it. And there's a reason for that. The reason is that people just want convenience. They want a large assortment, but isn't it also very convenient to get this at home? So at Picnic, we try to rethink this whole process from a modern perspective. So we strive to be the modern milkman, but not just with milk, but with a whole grocery assortment. And to make this happen, we need a lot of technology. Now, to understand the proposition, you must understand that we are an app-only supermarket. So everything we have happens in the digital world. So you as a customer have our Picnic store app, you place your order. Like I said, there's a wide assortment. It's not just a few items. And we also have really, really good prices. Why? Well, because we don't have the overhead of physical stores and everything that's associated with that. The cool thing is that we also really employ a milkman sort of concept in how we distribute our groceries. So there's no flexible time slot for every moment of the day. No, there's a fixed route per day where you as a customer can sort of latch onto and say, okay, at that point, I want to have my groceries. And then we can be very precise. Within a 20-minute time window, we can indicate that we're at your home. And this way we can be both efficient and very predictable. So all this together is the Picnic proposition, I would say. And this is why we develop the systems that we do. Now, from a perspective of systems, it's very easy to think that we're just developing an app. And obviously, this is the most user visible part, but there's a lot behind this app, obviously. So in terms of being able to support the app with the backend, we have a lot of code written, but there's also the whole process that comes after your order has been placed. So we need to actually pick those groceries in our fulfillment centers. We have our own systems there. We have everything running to make this a smooth process. And we're even in the process of creating a completely automated fulfillment center. So again, a lot of tech happening there. Then, once these groceries are picked and ready to be delivered, we actually need to plan all these electric vehicles. Hopefully, you've seen some of them already driving around if you're in the Netherlands or in Germany. They're quite iconic, these vehicles, but they do need planning and also need to have everything on board to actually fulfill the grocery delivery at the customer. So we have tech for that as well. And then last, but certainly not least, we want to please our customers, right? We want to make you happy. And to do that, we need to have a lot of interactions, especially when things sometimes go different than expected. In that case, there needs to be a complete flow and handling of all the customer service. Now, these are 4 large domains that we as Picnic with the tech team are currently addressing. And just to give you some numbers, Picnic really isn't that old. So we're in this race now for about 5 years. And at the moment, these numbers are even already a bit behind the facts, but we're roughly with 100 engineers. we have had 25K releases of these various systems behind us, over 500,000 customers in the Netherlands, and over 2 million lines of code. So you can definitely say that we learned a thing or two about scaling and about increasing our numbers. So in these 5 years, things have definitely changed in the way we structure our team, the way we structure our development. But at the same time, we have managed to keep a pace going that is well, pleasing our business, but is also very, well, I would say high quality still. And this is something that that did not happen by accident. And we'll see the tools, and especially Java development tools, that we employ to get there. Now, Phil mentioned he wouldn't mention Corona again. No, I will do it for him, because obviously something happens to us in terms of operations as well there. What you see here is a graph of some of the days during the first lockdown of traffic to our app. And what you see here is that at certain points, people started noticing that we had new delivery moments coming available, and people actually started, well, just swarming our app around these times. So during these Corona times, these first lockdowns, we actually experienced traffic of around 10 to even 15 times our normal peak traffic, which for us was a real challenge to address. But fortunately, we could do so because of some of the choices that we made and some of the architecture that we had in place already. But still, it was a pretty big challenge. So let me talk a little bit about the large scale perspective of these systems that I talked about and how we could handle these Corona scaling peaks, let's say. Now, since we're a pretty young company, we're fully cloud native. That means we don't have any legacy running on-premise or any other things that we need to take into account. And this is fortunately a big advantage for us. And in the beginning, Picnic was starting out with just a very simple, or at least, let's say, monolithic platform that was deployed to AWS using Elastic Beanstalk, Spring Boot based. And in the end, this was our e-commerce platform. So this was everything that was powering the app that you saw in the backend before that. Of course, if you're a startup, you cannot do everything at once at the beginning. So we also had a lot of external systems that we did not build ourselves that we had to integrate with. For example, around warehouse management for these fulfillment centers that I talked about, and the distribution and planning systems. So all of these, you just don't write them from scratch if you're a small startup from the beginning. Now, at some point, we started growing so big that these systems were becoming bottlenecks in terms of scalability or in terms of cost or otherwise. So once we grew with engineers, we also started building out our platform into a more services-based landscape. And what you see today is that we have a landscape that is fully based on Kubernetes, so the hosted Kubernetes service that is offered by Amazon. There's still a central platform, but around this we build a lot of new systems, for example, to do warehouse management for our distribution, and there are many more. I've just shown a few here, but in the end, it's dozens of services and systems that we're currently building with our tech team. And the really cool thing is that we could do this in an evolutionary way on AWS because we already had the basis there. And we also made a very deliberate choice not to be wanting to run our own infrastructure. So also for things like data stores, Amazon RDS and MongoDB Atlas, we make a choice to use the hosted variants there and not run those in detail ourselves. And same for messaging, we're using CloudAMQP for RabbitMQ instances. So this allowed us to scale also in these Corona times in a pretty safe and controlled manner. Now, this is not meant to be a high-level architectural talk, but if you talk about scaling, you definitely need to know this picture because this is how we address at the sort of top level the scaling of our systems at runtime. Now, if you talk about scaling, there's also another aspect, and that is performance and security and all kinds of other aspects of your system that you want to keep up. And for us, it's really important to be on the leading edge in terms of technology and the stack that we had. We're not that old, but still technology from 5 years ago is already somewhat outdated. So one example is that we moved from Java 8 to Java 11 a couple of months after Java 11 was released, so in the first quarter of 2019. And if you have not done so yet and you're on a Java stack, I really encourage you to do so. There are many benefits to this transition. And if you are dreading this because it seems like a very big upgrade, you might be surprised if you try this out that it's not that scary. Basically, if you run by this playbook, so where you first look at your tooling, like your build tooling, Maven, Gradle, etc., where you upgrade those to the latest versions, then do a sort of spring cleaning of your libraries, where you bring those to the latest versions, because almost all libraries in the Java space are already on Java 11 or later support. Then this is a pretty manageable exercise. There's also a tool called JDEPs, which you can use to see if your code depends on any internals of the JDK, because that is definitely an issue if you move from Java 8 to Java 11. You probably know that the JDK was modularized in Java 9, which restricts access to some of these internals. So in the end, if you have your current application and you can run it safely on Java 11, preferably with the illegal access flag set to deny, then you're actually good to also start thinking about upgrading your CI tooling to compile with Java 11 and to start using these new features. So this is what we did. Yes, it's work, but if you don't bite the bullet, then it only becomes increasingly hard to do so later on. One big thing if you make this upgrade and you want to keep up is that some dependencies need to be added to your code base if you're making this move, because, for example, the JAXB library has been removed from JDK, and same goes for some of the others here. Now, I sincerely hope you don't use Corba. If you do, you have my sympathy. But this is also one that has been removed from the JDK. So all in all, these major steps will help you to move from Java 8 to Java 11 and to keep up and to scale with the technology there as well. Now, there are also some interesting surprises that you might encounter when you do a major Java upgrade. We had one that looked like this, where at some point you have a unit test which says, okay, I'm expecting 10 euros and it's not equal to 10 euros. What's happening here? Of course, there are always these kind of edge cases. And so what happened here is that in a certain locale, when you format the string, the space between the euro sign and the amount was actually replaced by a non-breaking space, which is a different character. So it's not equal, but it looks the same. There will always be little things like this, but if you have good test coverage, like shown here, then this is already something that you will catch at a pretty early stage, hopefully. Then there are always deprecations and removals. For us, the most striking changes were only these. All in all, if you want to keep up with Java, which I highly recommend, this was not that big of a change. In fact, if you go from Spring 5 to 4 to 5, which we also did in a later time frame, so after we moved to Java 11, this was a much trickier and bigger migration for us. So what's to say here that if you want to use your technology effectively, if you want to scale, this also means just keeping up with these kind of developments and making the time and just taking the time to do this correctly. Now, another aspect of scaling these systems has to do with not the top level architecture and running in AWS, because it's great that you can obviously scale by adding replicas and adding more resources, but you also want to make effective use of your resources. And this is where we shifted a lot of our services from the blocking one request per thread model to a more reactive stack. And I'm not going to go into all the details and the advantages of having a reactive stack. There are different talks that do a much better job of that. I assume that a lot of you will have seen these talks. What I want to do is also highlight some of the more tricky aspects here. So for us, moving to reactive means that we at first started using RxJava, which was a couple of years back a choice that was pretty mainstream. At some point, we also started adopting Project Reactor from the Spring side, because a lot of our stack is Spring-based, and Spring Webflux as a technology was something that we also wanted to start to adopt. That made a lot of sense. So we're in the process of moving off RxJava all the way onto Project Reactor. And I think the good thing about going to this reactive programming model is, besides making more efficient use of your resources, it also encourages a more functional programming mindset. If you look at the APIs that you're offered from these reactive libraries, and it also forces you to think in terms of immutable data more and more, which is a net benefit, and we'll talk more about that later. However, at the same time, it's not all roses and sunshine. So if you look at reactive programming, there are also some aspects that are pretty hard to grasp for developers. So look at this simple example where we have a get user roles method, and we find a user in a repo, and then we say if the user is active, then we return the roles from the repo, and otherwise we return some default roles. Now, if you turn this whole code base into a reactive code base, things might look differently. Then you're suddenly talking about a flux of roles, for example, instead of a set of roles. And instead of having a repo that returns the user, you get some reactive wrapper around this user, which you can then use in a pipeline or a chain of reactive calls. In this case, we filter for a user whether it's active, and then we can use flat map many and switch if empty. This is all very interesting, of course, but quite a big of a departure from the control flow that we had in our original code. So this is definitely an issue if you as a developer need to get used to this new style of programming. So what we see here is that the whole control flow is flattened. You don't really see the if then else that well anymore. You need to think about schedulers and subscriptions, and do I not block in this whole reactive pipeline? And are they even equivalent, right? Because I can tell you that there's a subtle issue in this example where the behavior isn't really equivalent. And that is if the role repo returns no roles, then in this case, the default roles will also be returned. Whereas in the previous example, that would not be the case. So even these kind of translations are pretty tricky. All in all, this is not insurmountable, but it does take a lot of education and practice before you are comfortable with using reactive programming as a style. Another point that is pretty rough is debugging and interpreting stack traces, because reactive is pretty invasive. As you can see, this is one example of a piece of a stack trace of a reactive chain. It's pretty rough. Now, fortunately, there are some solutions. So we use the reactor debug agent, which tidies up some of these stack traces into something more digestible. But still, if you're going to adopt reactive, this is something that you will run into, and this will not make your life easier at 2 a.m. when there's an issue and you're looking at a stack trace. Also, on the tooling side, we use New Relic, where we ran into several issues where in our previous stack, we really got nice overviews of all different transactions, whereas switching to Webflux and reactive, we now got a lot less monitoring information. Fortunately, this was fixed at the New Relic site, but it does also show that adopting a new programming style library doesn't just affect your programmers, but it also affects your operations and your observability, etc. So things are definitely getting better here, but yeah, adopting this kind of technology also has its downsides. This is the message that I want to share here. Also, if you're doing reactive programming, you're most likely not end-to-end reactive. That means that at some point you probably have a database driver or some blocking HTTP call or some file I/O that you have not done in a reactive way yet. And you need to deal with this gracefully. And again, it's all doable and it's all possible, but it's also a source of subtle issues and problems that you might run into. For example, if you have some blocking call, you need to wrap it if you're using Reactor in a mono from callable, and you need to put it on a different scheduler. Again, it's not rocket science, but it's also not very trivial if you're coming from a non-reactive background. In the end, we made a trade-off that the benefits outweigh the downsides. But I urge you, if you're looking at this technology, to make this trade-off yourself as well, and to also take these sort of trickier parts into account. Again, for this particular issue, there are some workarounds and some helpful libraries. Blockhound is one of them that will warn you if you do the wrong thing. So that's helpful, but at the same time, the fact that you now have this class of errors that you can make is something that you need to take into account. Project Loom, which is coming up, hopefully in a couple of years within Java, might solve this, but in the meanwhile, I think reactive definitely has its place in the Java ecosystem, and it's also something that we're currently, like I said, heavily using. Now, these technology adoptions and changes are all about the software itself and how we scale these systems from a runtime perspective. I also want to talk a little bit about the tooling and the things that we have in place in order to scale our development practices and the way teams work. And this is not so much about process, Obviously, you need to do things there as well, but I really want to talk about concrete tooling and concrete things that we have in place to make our lives easier, let's say. So what typically happens when teams grow and a lot more software gets produced is that on reviews, GitHub, pull requests, a lot of comments are happening that are not really about the design of the code, but more on, well, let's say important, but not the most important parts of what is happening in the pull requests. So things like formatting and practices like, well, maybe we don't use optional or some other guidelines, tabs versus spaces, or please put the JIRA number in the commits. These are all important things to take care of. But at the same time, so much time can be wasted in discussions on pull requests with these kind of well, non-functional issues. And for us, this became more and more apparent. So what we try to do is, if we see recurring discussions, we try to automate them away. We try to make sure that we don't even need to have this discussion anymore. So that in the end, what you focus on in pull request reviews is the code itself and the functionality of the code itself. Does it do what it intends to do? How is the design of the code? And all these more high-level aspects that you should be talking about. Now, the way we do this is by employing a few tools, which I want to highlight, one of which is called Danger. And Danger is something that you can hook into your CI build and your source control system. In our case, we have Travis as our CI server and GitHub as our source control and management environment. And for example, the discussion that we had about wanting to have JIRA numbers in our commits, we can easily automate this away by creating a Danger script that loops over all commits that are in the pull request and looks at the commit message and sees if it matches this pattern of starting with a JIRA issue number. Boom, no need to be pedantic anymore. No more, oh, there's that guy again. But still, you're enforcing consistency, because if it doesn't match, you will automatically get a comment on this pull request telling you to fix it, and nobody needs to nobody needs to spend any more time on this discussing these kind of things. And there are a lot of things that you can express in Danger. One favorite check of mine is that we also have a check that looks through all the source code comments to see if the issue that you're currently fixing with the pull request is also removed from all to-dos in your code, for example, so that you see any dangling issues. And all these kind of checks can be automated and can really help you have a productive workflow around your pull requests. Now, on to the big questions in life, like tabs or spaces, right? So folks, this is where relationships have ended. If you've seen Silicon Valley, like in the picture here, countries have been torn apart. I mean, this is the big issue, right? Well, for us, it is not any longer. So what we do is trivial things like source code formatting. We just automate this. And this means that we standardize on the Google Java formatter using the Android open source project style. Is it the prettiest? I don't care. It's consistent, right? And we don't ever have to argue anymore about formatting, what looks good, what doesn't look good. So in the end, this is something that we automate away as well. And again, we use Danger for this. So of course, developers have the Google Java formatter running locally. But if they forget to apply it, or if they don't want to have a post commit hook that does it for them, then the CI server will still run the formatter. And then we ask Danger to do this for us and see if there's a git diff after running this format on the CI server. And if there's a diff, that means, well, we didn't format code. So we will put a comment and we will block the pull request from being merged. So this way, we have a consistent code base, and we have no discussions around formatting anymore, and we have happy developers. Well, most of them probably. And if you have a stylistic issue, well, take it up with Google, I would say. Now, one other thing that we've automated in our development process around Java applications is one thing that I really like, that is using the Renovate bot. And what Renovate does for us is it scours all the repositories, so Maven Central, etc., for upgrades for dependencies that we have in our code. So in this case, you see an example where we are using the Hikari connection pool where we're currently using version 3.4.5, and it says, well, there's a new version available for 4.01. And I've already created a pull request for you that does this upgrade with a also nicely suggested commit message to use there. And there's only a few manual steps left to do this upgrade. And now, if you have a few dependencies, it might not be a big deal to do this yourself, but we have a lot of dependencies and a lot of different dependencies across different products. So having a bot do this for us is a real time saver. So again, highly recommended if you're doing Java development to also configure this for your CI environment. Another tool that is very helpful to us, and that is not that widely known, is called error prone. So a lot of Java developers have heard about find bugs, spot bugs, or these kind of analysis tools. And error prone is a variation on this kind of tooling. It is a tool to detect Java bugs or anti-patterns in code, but it works a bit differently than the usual suspects. Instead of working on the bytecode and doing analysis there, it is a compiler plugin for the Java compiler. The nice thing is that it's also possible to write your own additional checks, and it can even do automated patching. So this is something that is pretty heavily used within Picnic. I'll show you a little demo of how this works shortly. But even if you're not customizing error prone at all, you already get a very useful list of bug patterns that the error prone tool will check for and will help you flag your code. There's even a testimonial by Doug Lee, the famous developer who works on the Java concurrency libraries, where he admits that error prone found a bug in concurrent hash map, which I think is a pretty good endorsement. So how does it work? I'm going to quickly switch to a short demo small demo environment, where I have a very simple Java class here, which only says new illegal arguments exception. Now, you probably know that this is a no-op, right? Usually, if we have an exception, we need to throw it. But this is perfectly valid Java code, so it will normally compile. But what if we're going to configure error prone? Let's do it like this. Then we can see that in the compiler arguments, we're enabling the error prone plugin. On the annotation processor path, we're putting the error prone dependency. We also need to specify a simple compile policy, and this is because error prone works on the AST, the abstract syntax tree of the Java compiler, so it makes some assumptions on that, and we can enforce these assumptions to be true by enabling this compile policy. But in the end, error prone hooks into the Java compiler and helps us find bugs. So if I'm now going to compile this piece of code, you will see that error prone kicks in. You're actually getting a compile error from the Java compiler telling you that there's a dead exception. So the exception is created but not thrown. There's even a link to a very nice explanation. This holds for all the bug patterns that are in error prone. So this is something that you can use to detect these errors. But the really cool thing about error prone is that it's not just a detection tool. It can actually also fix these problems for you. So if I'm going to add some flags to the plugin configuration, where I'm saying, okay, for patching, apply these checks, including the dead exception that we just ran into, and patch the code into some location. And in this case, I'm just going to patch the code in place. So it will just change my source code right here and right there. If I now run Maven again and let the compiler do its work and the error prone plugin do its work, you can already see that I have a change in my code, and it actually fixed the code for me. Now, this is really cool, right? I mean, the first time I saw this really blew my mind. It can actually fix errors for me, and it can actually do this so easily. That's really cool. So going back to error prone, these checks are very general and very useful. But you can also create your own checks, like I said. But as you saw, error prone goes further than just checking code. You can also change code. So it's even possible to create refactoring templates that match a certain pattern of code, and then rewrite it into another pattern. And this is called refaster. This is a sub-project of error prone. And these refaster templates can then be used to apply these patches, as you just saw happen with the dead exception. Now, an example of creating such a template looks like this. And as you can see, you don't have to do any scary abstract syntax tree manipulations. You can just write these patterns in concrete syntax. So we have the add before template here, where we say, okay, if you encounter something, an expression where there's a negation, so the negation and then optional dot is present, please rewrite it to optional dot is empty, which is available as of Java 11, for example. Another example, if you encounter any of the patterns where you see a stream filtered on optional is present and then you map optional get over it, or you see a stream where streams, the stream method of Guava is mapped over it, then rewrite it to stream flat map optional stream. So the after template here, which is also again something that's only available in Java 11. And if you do this, if you use this together with the error-prone plugin and the patching and the rewriting that I just did, that I just showed you, this gives you a really, really powerful tool to do refactoring at scale, to do automated refactoring and to do transitions of older patterns in your code to newer patterns in your code. So this is a really powerful use of error-prone and refaster. And again, we integrate this with Danger. So if on the CI server, we run all our error-prone checks and refactor templates, and there's some difference between what was committed, this means that you have not applied all the rules and all the patterns that we want to have in the code base. You need to fix this before the pull request becomes mergeable and becomes part of the mainline. So very powerful tool. I really urge you to look into this if you're interested in doing this kind of development and have these guarantees. So there are several ways to use error-prone. You can just use it as a bug checker with some predefined checks, as I've shown. You can also use it to a much greater extent to have your own templates in there and have your own anti-patterns flagged or even rewritten using refaster. Another thing, and this is the last thing that I wanted to highlight that we do with error-prone, is applying some patterns that are pretty useful. So in general, we know that we want to have variables, local variables and parameters in our code to be final, right? So we don't want to reassign to variables because that makes the code less readable, less understandable. But at the same time, adding final everywhere, just so as to prevent people from reassigning to this variable, introduces a lot of noise. So what you can do with error-prone is invert this default. So what you can do is you can use the add var annotation, which is also provided by error-prone, and then just configure error-prone to say every local variable, every parameter is assumed to be final, even if there's no final keyword on there. And if for some reason you want to have a variable that you can reassign to, then you must use the add var annotation to indicate this. So you're flipping this around. You are introducing the noise when you want to use a mutable variable. And if not, then everything looks pretty clean, but is still assumed to be final. Again, something made possible by these error-prone checks that are happening in the compiler plugin. That's part of the error-prone project. And these kind of tweaks really make your life easier while maintaining a high level of quality in your code. Speaking of immutability, even if you make your variables final, it doesn't really save you, right? Because that doesn't mean that the object that you assign to such a variable is in fact immutable. And reasoning about immutability is a real benefit from understandability perspective, from maintainability perspective, especially if you are working with reactive code and you cannot make too many assumptions about what happens when and who does what on which thread, then immutability becomes a real lifesaver. But as we know, Java by default has mutable state, and there are obviously a lot of tools that can help with that. One of them is, for example, Lombok, but we have selected the Immutables project as our tool of preference to model immutable data in Java. Immutables is a project that helps you to, in a very lightweight way, define your data objects and then generate code that implements this as an immutable object. with builders, with all kinds of other goodies around this. And what happens is that you in your code write, for example, a Java interface or some other abstract type, put some immutable annotations on there to guide the translation into the immutable class. And the translations are done by a annotation processor, which is just a fairly standard Java annotation processor. And this one generates the immutable class for you. Now, what does this gain you? Well, you get an object where you automatically get a saying equals hash code and to string implementation, a builder to go with it to build up an object before you seed it as immutable, copy methods, and some other very nice things like lazy properties, the ability to do precondition checking, some deep integration with the Guava immutable collections, which we also use a lot. So all in all, for us, a very nice choice that fits into our ecosystem. So I want to give a short demo of that as well. And in the interest of time, usually what I do is I take a Pojo and I refactor it to an immutable. Here, I'm just going to show what the end result is. So what you see here is that I have an interface, in this case called iProduct, and it only has the get name, get brand, and get price definitions here without any body or implementation. And on that, we put the addValue.immutable annotation. This triggers the annotation processor of immutables to generate an immutable object. You can see it here. It's in my generated sources. So this product, we don't have to look at it usually, but just to give you an idea of what is generated for you, all the getters, the equals, hash code to string, even a builder for you. And if we look at how this can be used, for example, in our product API controller, you can see that you can start a builder, which is generated, of course, with the appropriate properties that you can configure. Then in the end, you build the object and you pass it back. And it can just be used as a object that will be mapped to JSON by Spring. Nothing wrong with that. There are a lot of other goodies that you can get. For example, you can extend your object with properties that have a default value, and that makes clever use of the default methods that you can have in interfaces nowadays, where if you do not define the on sale property, as is the case here, then by default you will get false, but you can still override it if you want to by setting another property. Like I said, every immutable object can also result in a new immutable object. For example, if I want to override the price here, and I want to put a different price on it, you do it like this. This will result in a copy of the coffee object with a new price. So all pretty useful and pretty helpful to get immutable data in your systems and not get bogged down with all the details. Again, there are other tools. What I like about immutables is you still have a clear definition in your code. It's traceable to the generated source code, so there's no magic happening at compile time to generate any classes. It already happens quite visible, which is a difference with Lombok, for example. You can also influence the way the names are generated. So here I'm saying, okay, every abstract type I have starting with an I should result in an immutable output without an I. You can have your own naming pattern here. So in the end, you don't really want to refer to this interface anymore. You want to build based on the generated product that we have here. And that's all possible. Now, immutables combined with this trick that we had in AeroProm gives us 99% of the way towards immutability in Java without sacrificing too much. And I really believe this is one of the reasons why we could also adopt the reactive programming style and the tricky pitfalls that come with that to be ready for that by having immutability. Now, of course, Java itself is also moving more in towards this direction. So in new versions of Java, we will get records. This will be released in Java 16, for example, where you can have a simple record definition and only list the components of your records. And then you also get a constructor, accessor methods, equals, hash code, and toString. This will be not as rich as what you can do with immutables. But still, for a lot of use cases, this will be an adequate replacement. So very much looking forward to having this as part of the language and the base there as well. So because we're nearing the end and I want to have a little bit of time for Q&A as well, let's wrap up. For me, the key takeaways of what we do and what we did is that we want to choose technology that scales well. So on the one hand, at the top level, in our cloud native strategy using AWS and Kubernetes. But at the same time, we also want to have our Java systems and the technologies that we use there on the leading edge, let's say. So we need to aggressively keep up with new versions there and new programming styles. And to do that, we also want to scale our development process. And tools like Error-Prone with Refactor help us to do large-scale refactorings to catch a lot of issues that might otherwise slip through the cracks early on, not just with predefined bug patterns, but also with a lot of checks that we write ourselves and a lot of patterns that we can rewrite ourselves. So in the end, this relentless automation, also with, like I've shown, with Danger and all the renovate bots and everything we do around our pull request process, really helps us to deliver software at a quick pace, but at a high quality, and at the same time, also make it still fun, right? Because in the end, who wants to talk about depths versus spaces? No one. We really want to talk about algorithms. We want to talk about features. We want to talk about getting stuff out there in the market. And well, this is our way of approaching that. Now, if you like what you saw and what you heard, then I very much urge you to go to join.picnic.app, because we're looking for a lot of new people to help us out and help keep on expanding this great venture that is Picnic. And with that, I would like to open the floor also to questions. Hopefully, Phil, you have a few.
Yes, Sander, thank you very much for the great presentation. Learned also a lot, even though Refactor and Error-Prone save me on a daily basis. It's really good to see how they work internally and how you can write your own rules. Super cool stuff. So we actually have quite a few questions, probably too many that we can get around to, but let's kick it off.
Yeah,
Number one, you mentioned that reactive programming paid off, and in what sense? Do you think that an event-based system, book coded in an imperative way, rather than with reactive programming, would achieve similar performance at Picnic?
To start with the latter question, so there are a lot of ways to do sort of the reactor pattern, right? So where you indeed handle events on a single thread. So yes, I can definitely see that there would have been different routes to get to the same sort of model. Why then reactor and Webflux? Well, the ecosystem that we're in and that we're heavily invested in is the Spring ecosystem. So for us, even though we started with RX, for example, we don't really want to go against the grain. And we want to embrace also what is embraced in the Spring ecosystem. So Reactor and Webflux are top of mind there, are also something that we see working pretty well currently. So in that sense, yes, there could have been different approaches, but this one really fits our, let's say, our ecosystem that we already have.
Great, then let's move on to the next one, also about reactive programming. I heard that Kotlin has a better reactive support, especially with debugging. Did Picnic consider using Kotlin? And if so, what are your arguments not to use it?
So changing languages just to get a different execution model is quite drastic change, right? So I would not do this for a single reason. Obviously, there are a lot of other things that are nice in Kotlin. I think the question is referring to coroutines in Kotlin and async in Kotlin, which is indeed pretty nice. At the same time, and this is something that I discussed just today with some other people as well, moving to a different language also has a lot of non-technical aspects. Like, do you have enough people who actually enjoy working in this language? Can you hire enough people? And being on Java really helps us in terms of our recruitment reach, in terms of our ability to grow as quickly as we do. You saw the numbers, right, in the beginning of the slide. Going to Kotlin would bring this hiring pool down. So that's one reason. Another reason is I don't believe Java is that far behind. And as I've shown, Loom and records and all these kind of things are also coming up. Yes, it takes more time, but at the same time, well, because we already were in Java and we keep expanding on that, we also want to be part of that future. Yeah, just switching a language to get an advantage in some area that we also will be getting at a later point in time in Java itself also does not make too much sense.
Yeah, exactly. I think I agree. Like the Java maybe seem like a grandfather that's slow to follow, but certainly does after Kotlin does some cool stuff. Usually coming from the Android world as well.
Yeah, and Java is going faster and faster as well, right? So we get 2 releases every year, and a lot of cool stuff is happening there.
Yeah, exactly. And Project Loom hopefully is just around the corner, as you say. Cool. Then the next one, why did you migrate from Java to 8 to 11 instead of just creating a new component with the new versions and copy all the needed tests and start implementing? And the same with the Spring migration.
I'm not quite sure I understand the question. I mean, migration means, yeah, this is obviously happens on a branch and happens on a copy of the existing system, of course. So I'm not too sure what the question behind this question is, actually, Phil.
Yeah, no, me neither. Maybe you can clarify in the thread and we can come back to it, but I'll move on to the next one.
Yeah.
So Sonar Lint and Sonar Cube are also useful. This is more of a statement, but definitely, maybe you can talk, Leonard, about how we use Sonar Cube.
That's true. Sonar Cube we also have in place. It's just not something that blocks our CI, right? So this is something that runs more nightly and does even more in-depth analysis and more visualization also. So definitely an important tool that developers definitely use to get more insight and also keep a tab on the quality. The tools I mentioned are the ones that are really in the sort of hot path of our development cycle.
Cool. Then the next one, did you find any barrier or challenges with applying a massive migration, refactoring with Refaster? Any technical challenges or difficulties with developers using it?
So one of the things, if you're going to do this at a large scale, is that for every pattern that you introduce, you need to have everyone on board, right? So this is something that we apply across all our projects, which means that at some point we release this new check, this new pattern, and that means that every repository needs to actually make this change. So you only want to do this for things that are not that controversial. And it turns out that some things people totally agree on. Other things are a bit more contentious, more taste oriented. So I think guiding these kind of discussions around what is really applicable for everyone versus what is only applicable to you is something that that you really need to go through if you apply this tooling. The other thing is that it is not tooling that the developers typically are used to. So creating these patterns, even though you can do it in concrete syntax, is already very nice. At the same time, you still need to know a little bit about the limitations of error-prone as well. It only does expression refactoring, so you cannot do things across multiple statements, for example. So there are limitations that you need to be aware of and that you will run into if you start using this.
Great. Then maybe time for one or two more. One from Chris. Does error-prone only take into account the changed lines of a commit so that only newly written or updated code is validated against the rules? If not, isn't it bothering the code reviewing process in terms of distinguishing updated logic and mere refactorings?
So no, when you run error-prone as part of your Java compile process, it looks at all code. So what makes it work for us is that no pull request ever gets merged if the error-prone checks don't pass, right? So you only have the issues that are introduced as of this PR. And in that way, again, this has to do with what I said. If we are introducing a rule, then it needs to be applied across all repositories before we actually enable it and start doing it. So there's no sort of hidden technical depth. Every line of code is checked all of the time.
Yes, great. Then Joachim did reply in the thread, and he said that, so this is the original question about the making a new component, i.e. just copying the existing implementation, and then the standard the discussions with microservices is always fix your code and rebuild the whole component, because a microservice component, service component should be as small so you can throw away and build it again.
Right. Yeah, if you make a bigger change, like for example, going from Java to Kotlin, I would definitely do that. Going from Java 8 to Java 11 does not warrant such a drastic approach, I would say. It is just incremental evolution, even though it might be tricky to find out what to do. In the end, all the changes combined are not that big together, I would say. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. And maybe in the interest of time, we can move on. There's plenty of good questions there, I know, but maybe you can answer them in the thread.
Sure.
Yes. So thanks very much, Sander.
Thank you, Phil. Let's move on.
Then next on the agenda is Ko, who is going to present to us all about the battle of the IDEs. He's going to show us some really cool tips, tricks, hacks to make our lives a lot easier, and will hopefully also wow our colleagues. So take it away, Ko.
Yeah, thank you. One moment, I will share my screen. No, share. Yeah, welcome. Thank you for having me, Picnic, Phil, Sander. Thank you very much. At first, I would say please scan the QR code to let us know which IDE you are using. And at the end, I will show the results. And yeah, I want to know who is using what. So yeah, this is chance to vote. Together with the results, we will have a raffle for an IntelliJ license at the end. So please be waiting for the last end. Please tweet something nice about Sander, Phil, and me. Please tag, and we will have a winner at the end. So please do. Today we are going to talk about IDEs. It will be a light talk with, I try some fun, some artists. So we are going to compare Pokemon with IDEs. Yeah, we are going to compare Pokemon with IDEs. Why? Just because it's fun. So let's begin. Watch out, there will be some sound now. I wanna be the very best. No one ever was. To catch them is my real test. To train them is my... So, and so on and so on. Pokemon is a series broadcasted in the 90s, and it's about some two trainers who are fighting against each other with Pokemons. So let's begin. I'm Ash, is one of the guys. And yeah, we had a fight. I had a fight with my colleague. It was really like, hey, it's a Pokemon fight. Which ID are you using? So yeah, he was trying to get his Pokeball, and he said, I'm using this ID, he's saying. And he was throwing his Pokeball, and he was using Eclipse. So yeah, I was saying Eclipse rocks and it is better than IntelliJ or Visual Studio Code or whatever. Yeah, I was just curious, why is he using Eclipse? And why are other people using Visual Studio Code, NetBeans, Emacs, IntelliJ, of course? And so that raises me a question. And I also have a Pokeball. And at that moment, I was using IntelliJ. So yeah, he likes Eclipse. I like IntelliJ at that moment, but we still respect each other. And it also can be someone else, right? It can be also vice versa. So who do you think is the winner? Is it IntelliJ or Eclipse? Yeah, it's a personal preference. Yeah, an idea is something personal. Don't try to force it on other people, but we still have a look and see which idea is better and suits your needs. So, hi, my name is Ko Turk. I'm working for Blue IT at the Rabobank nowadays, but it's now at home like everyone else. And I'm working in my shed. It's perfectly silent without children. So I like the tech stack also. I like Spring Boot, Java 14, and even more. TypeScript, Cloud Foundry, and more. I like to speak. I like to drive, going to the Utrecht Juk in the past. And the battle of the IDEs. This is Duke, the first Java Pokemon ever. And he's going to help me to catch some IDEs for us. So the problem, I don't know the ins and outs of my IDE. Yeah, mostly if I help juniors, for example, they don't know the ins and outs of the IDE. So I help them and I give them tips and tricks, what you can better install, like plugins and that kind of things. So imagine that you have the following situation. You're pair programming. So I have one guy next to me and we are pairing. He's a junior, I'm a senior. You have one driver and one navigator and you switch them sometimes. Yeah, nowadays it's all remote. So I will discuss also some plugins to work to pair program remote. So it's very interesting. And yeah, you think I want to show him that I am the best developer ever, but yeah, that's a little bit tricky, right? It's difficult, and in the past we were also mobbing, and everyone was looking to your screen, and now it's even more. And yeah, that's tricky, right? Yeah, mobbing is also meaning bullying of an individual by a group, and yeah. Yeah, let's try to make it better, your life better. Mobbing is not so scary if you know your IDE. Or use the power mode plugin to get your attention. If you don't know your IDE or you cannot code good enough, then you can install this plugin in IntelliJ, for example. You can you can code like this and it looks okay. And then you're refactoring and you extract the method and bam, it looks like really nice. And yeah, you have kind of effects, of course, a lot of effects. And it's just, yeah, to keep our work fun, right? So search for a good IDE. How? So I ask people like Venkat, Josh Lang, a lot of people, even Trisha Key. Yeah, it's really nice to hear people's opinion. My network, Java trainers, TypeScript, frontend, Scala, everything, but the most is Java and Kotlin and JavaScript, TypeScript in that corner. So let's catch one. You have Fire, Water, Electric, Grass Pokemon. You have Java, TypeScript, JavaScript, Groovy. And yeah, you can choose, right? About, yeah, these are the main players, IntelliJ, or JetBrains in this case. You have NetBeans, Eclipse, and Visual Studio Code. You see that Visual Studio Code is mostly focused on front-end technologies like JavaScript, TypeScript. You see Eclipse mostly Java. NetBeans is all kind of sort, Java, PHP, and IntelliJ a lot is default supported without installing a plugin if you have the ultimate version. And what is also very important is to look for an IDE with remote pair program possibilities. So in IntelliJ, the last, the early, the EIP version, you have a Code with Me plugin. It's very handy if you want to share your code with someone else. You can invite people and you can have a call even. And people have your link and can join. They need to install IntelliJ or the client, and then you can code with them. So that's really nice. It's also in a plugin in earlier versions of IntelliJ, beginning from 2020.2. So yeah, please check it out. It's really nice. And you have also more, you have a code together if you want to use Eclipse, for example. Or based on Visual Studio Code, you have code together. You can use Eclipse and the other one can then use, for example, IntelliJ or Visual Studio Code. And then you can share it among different IDEs. For Visual Studio Code, you have Live Share. And it's also really nice. You can share your code with Visual Studio Code between those IDEs. And the last one, I would say, you have also Git Live. It's in also an EIP version, but this gives you some more. Like you can see what people are doing and in which files. So that's also pretty awesome. People are changing some things like here. That's really awesome. And I also saw in the NL Jug magazine, I saw an article about pair programming remote. So you definitely need to see that. It's really nice about Gaia. And yeah, I will advise watch that one or read that one. It's really nice. So that's about the pair program possibilities. So yeah, nowadays it's very important, right? And then it's the next step, how to understand your IDE. Learn the shortcuts of your IDE. It's very important. In the previous time, you had a lot of talks about shortcuts, IntelliJ shortcuts, Eclipse shortcuts, and it's really helpful. In the past days, I was using VI even, or Emacs. It's all with shortcuts. And yeah, you really need it if you want to be you want to be quicker, for example, and show you that you're the best developer ever, right? And it's also research where people were saying, hey, if you learn your shortcuts, then you're quicker and then you are more effective. And people were using Emacs were very effective. So people were using Emacs know how to program or know the IDE, and also with Vim or VI. So that's what I want to say, shortcuts. And at the end, you can do something like this. And if people are watching this and yeah, you're saying, oh, what are you doing? You must be a senior developer, but you only know your shortcuts, nothing about programming, for example. But it's very useful to know it because you're quicker then. But how? In NetBeans, for example, you have a key promoter. You have it also for IntelliJ. It shows you a pop-up with, hey, use this shortcut, and then next time you are quicker. And this time it's really annoying pop-up, but you can also have a gentle one at the bottom. So yeah, that is really nice to learn more. So I would recommend it to install it and also understand the features of your IDE, right? That's very, you need to know that. Like a features trainer. This is an old version. I saw the screenshot, but in the latest, you also have a features trainer. You can learn the editor basics, how code completion works, refactorings, and it's also really nice if you don't know it yet. I will recommend it also. And then you see something like a tutorial, like basic completion. How is that working? For IntelliJ. And for Eclipse, you have code mix. You can learn all kind of things, and also your IDE with this one. You have for JetBrains, you have also edu tools. You have tutorials, courses, which you can follow. It's a standard, or you can install a plugin in the ultimate version. And of course, read books, right? That's very important. So what do you need to do? So it's pretty wide, I see. Install a shortcut plugin, learn the features of your IDE, and of course, read books, ebooks, follow courses, and that kind of things. This is the first step. And the next step is to train your Pokemon or train your IDE to be very powerful, because it doesn't have everything you want or need. Like Pokemons have some default attacks, and like IDEs have the default must-have plugins. Give them your power, the IDEs. And one of the must-have plugins, I already heard it in Sander's talk about the SonarLint. It's there for IntelliJ, Eclipse, and Visual Studio Code. And it's very powerful. It shows you right away what you're doing wrong. So yeah, that's I have installed by default. It's very handy, but you can also install it or through build time, right? So if you have a Maven build, for example, you have some check style, and you can just add it in your POM, and with some checks, right? Like I don't want unused imports. It's very ugly. I don't want star imports, empty blocks, and that kind of things. There are a lot of that kind of things you can check. Google have a lot of those rules, so you can also watch them on the internet. It's really powerful. And if people want to commit, you have right away an error instead of need to change it again. And yeah. Second must-have plugin for all the ones is the Lombok. Yeah, you can of course use Kotlin, even better I think, but you can also use Lombok, right? Just with one annotation. If you want a getter or setter, or SLF4J, it's mostly used in our company. Like you want to have a log, you don't need to create loggers and that kind of things. It's very handy and less boilerplate code, and yeah, it's really nice. The third one is the themes. I really like the themes. If you want to show them that you are different, install a different theme, for example. In Eclipse, you have a darkest dark theme, dev style. I really like that one. I'm using this one in IntelliJ. It's a material one. I really like the colors there, because then in one shoot you can see, hey, the classes and highlighting, and that's really nice. And then NetBeans you also have a darkular. So and in Visual Studio Code you have, for example, icons, and I really like the icons. It's just an install like this. Yeah, and you have some nice. You can see that it's TypeScript, for example, or whatever. So yeah, that's the must-have plugins. But you also need your learn your Pokemon to have new tricks, or your IDE. And that's the next for IntelliJ, for example. Yeah, IntelliJ can be evolved. So you're now using a tiny, light version, but you need to install some plugins to make it better or suit for you. And this is the most important plugin. Read it. It's the Nyan-Cat plugin. Yeah. It's again fun. It's just a loading bar, and it's make some fun of your daily work. And you have it also for Super Mario. But now back to some really important stuff, like the Snick plugin. It's really powerful if you want to check, for example, if you have vulnerabilities in your dependency. It's, for example, in a technology radar a long time ago. And yeah, it gives you in your IDE, if you install it, suggestions like, hey, you're using a Spring Boot version, and there's already a new version where they fixed a lot of security issues, and you don't want it in your code. And mostly they have it in the build in Jenkins or Azure. Yeah, they do the checks, but you can already do those checks in your at compile time at your IDE. So this one is really a nice one. A Maven helper, maybe less interesting, but in the past, sometimes you had a lot of libraries that collapsing with each other, and you can easily exclude them. But you can also, of course, exclude them through the POM, but this gives you some GUI to exclude it easily. But yeah. Rainbow brackets I like also. It gives you some more colors, like, hey, I'm using this class with a lot of, yeah, if you have this, then you need to probably think about your design. But yeah, you can see easily, hey, where is it going to? And then you see, hey, I'm missing a bracket here. And then you know it easily. So Cadota, you also have it in Visual Studio Code. It's giving you some hints what you need to type in. maybe you want to create this method, or you call it, I mean, or otherwise it's really powerful. It gives you also some examples. So yeah, like how you do a get in the past days. Yeah. Stack Overflow, it's very powerful. Just right click and it's go to Stack Overflow for the Stack Overflow people. It's very, very, very handy, but yeah. Square test to create test, for example. Yeah, we have a conference controller and I want to create a test. I'm going to go to generate test with my shortcut Command N. I'm using Mac, or Control N, it is new. And then you say, hey, generate a test for me. And then you have already a test if you already have your code. If you're not working TDD, if you work TDD, it's better even. But yeah, if you have old legacy projects or something, you don't sometimes have a JUnit test. It's yeah, it can be. It's pretty bad, but it can be, of course. And this is very powerful to get rid of some boilerplate coding you don't want to type in. Next one, you have the Vim. You can also use Vim in your IDE. Like this, you can type it in. Yeah, you can use your shortcuts. Yeah, and then you'll be quicker if you know VI of Vim. You can see it right there. You have also plugins for Jira integration. I like. You can have a connection to Jira. So you can see what kind of issues there are. And I think in Visual Studio Code it's even better, I think, but yeah. Oh, this is also a nice one. The Friday Mario plugin. If you want to annoy your people if you're working together. I like it. I like Mario. Who doesn't like Mario, right? And you can also stop it because you can have a sound. If you change your code, for example, poof. Yeah, and so on and so on. So yeah, that's how to make your IntelliJ live some easier. It's really nice to suit it for your needs. I also want to show some Eclipse things and how to yeah, how to evolve Eclipse, for example. In Eclipse, you have, for example, the enhanced class decompiler. If you want to, it's standard in IntelliJ that you just see your decompiled code. But in the past, I needed to install these kind of decompilers to show the decompiled code. If you are in need another class inside some other jar. Spring tools. Yeah, you can use Spring tools 4, 3, even 5, I think. Yeah, to use Spring. You also have Snyk for Eclipse. Also, again, it's recommended to use it just to find security breaches in your Maven build, in your POM or your Gradle. It's for both. And then you can see, hey, you're doing some weird stuff like deserialization, and fix it. Otherwise, you have a security risk in your code and you don't want it, right? You also have the mutation testing plugin. Of course, you have it also for other IDEs, but if you want to check your test, are your tests correct? Are you writing your tests correctly? Then you have the PyTest, and you can see, hey, how many mutants are surviving. It's changing your test just to check your test if they are okay. And at last, you get a coverage report if your tests are good or not, or you forget maybe some things like an if statement you're forgetting, or you don't have an if statement correctly, that kind of things. You also have Eclipse CodeWind. If you want to have a build on for example, on a container, a different container, you can just run it through your production container, for example, your code, and check if your code is correctly, instead of pushing it to a test environment or to a production environment. Or yeah, that's why it's using CodeWind. It's also a topic for the future. I think you have in the future you have also maybe cloud IDEs like Eclipse Taya. I don't know if I pronounced it correctly, but it's using it's just a browser IDE you can use without consuming your own resources. It can be powerful if you have less resources and that kind of things. It's using LSP, a language service protocol, like language servers, how to refactor, for example, debug. It's using debugging from the language server, auto-completion. It's based, yeah, it's made in TypeScript also there, but yeah. And it's very handy to use refactoring, for example, like Eclipse Taya is using a language server, and where you can use this kind of things, like it's just imported, kind of imported in your IDE. And yeah, it's very powerful. You have it also in Emacs, for example. In Emacs, you can use the Eclipse language service protocol like this one. And it feels like you're having an Eclipse IDE inside your Emacs, because Emacs is based on shortcuts and you're very powerful in that. You don't want to switch, for example, to Visual Studio Code, IntelliJ, whatever. And you can just import in your Emacs IDE, and even in your editor are some possibilities that you can do, for example, code completion. So can be very nice if you don't want to change your IDE, for example. Eclipse has the most plugins, so yeah, it suits almost all your needs. I like this one from Snick, from Brian. Some plugins like Sonalint. Also, we set Gradle. He's a fan of Gradle. Some Git tooling, editors, and more and more and more. So I will set this presentation. I will upload it to Twitter also later on. So follow me if you want to have it. I will be quick for this one. It's a bean. It's a NetBean. And for NetBeans, there also, I make it quick for this one because most of the people are using IntelliJ Eclipse. You have some Spring Boot plugins, for example. You have a Git Ignore plugin, very powerful. Yeah, you have a Git toolbar. This I really like. I really like the Git toolbar of this one, because you really see in one view what's the history. Also, I can switch to the history with one click. Yeah, I like that, but yeah. You have also a Maven runner. You can do easy Maven clean install and that kind of things. And NetBeans is also heavily used among people that are in this world early. So yeah, it's also very powerful. And then you have Visual Studio Code. Let's jump into that one. I like the first IDE that was checking pair programming. I thought it was Visual Studio Code. They had the first one with live sharing. I really like that one. You can share your code with other, like juniors. A little demo. Oh, this, yeah, correct. You can just start a session, for example, and yeah, the other one can join. I'm now switching between IDEs, and you already see, hey, I'm joining URL, and I'm sharing my repository. So that's pretty cool. And people can also change it. So if I have this one, people have also like the possibility to change it. Like we can add some conferences, and we also see, hey, Ko Turk is changing something in this thing, or he is there on a previous line. But you can, yeah, easily just, instead of through teams and one is the drive, you can also pair programming together. And yeah, you can also stop it, and yeah, it's very easy. Just stop a collaboration and invite others. You can also do, you can invite other people who join you with pair programming or even mobbing. Yeah, if you want to work with each other. You have code reviews you can also show in your IDE. I don't like to go, for example, to go to Bitbucket or Azure DevOps to read my pull requests to, hey, what are people? I just want to have one view, and that's my IDE. And also, you just install a plugin. It's the pull request, and there's a pull request on my branch, and you already see it. Hey, I can approve it, for example. I can comment it on different lines. I can merge it and that kind of things. And it's very powerful. And I didn't see it with other IDEs. So yeah, you can comment it. Yeah, the best conference, the best meetup is Picnic, of course. And yeah, this one I made for JavaZone, but it's even, I'm using it now, so really nice. So what do you need to do? Install the Snyk plugin. It's very powerful just to check your dependencies, right? Your Maven. It's I thought it was sharing your build, so your dependencies, and then show you the results. You can install Sonalint to be a better programming, install a pair programming possibilities, and some fun things, right? Like the Nyan or the Friday Mario plugin to make it some fun, because our work is also fun, I think. So now the next step, last minutes, the battle. Who's going to win? Yeah, we have all kind of IDEs in the field. Let's have a fight. Like, yeah, why do I need Eclipse? I was asking. I asked my colleague a year ago, hey, why are you using Eclipse? And he was saying some, I can show you the video, but because of the timing issues and maybe questions, I will skip it for now. But he said, I really like Eclipse because it's free. You don't need a license, that kind of things. You have a lot of plugins. The Java support is terrific. I'm also using Eclipse Theia, so yeah, I can just work from anywhere if I want without my laptop. I can use other laptops and that kind of things. Yeah, and the features are very good, like refactoring and that kind of things. And yeah, it's also very powerful, of course. And I was also saying IntelliJ. I was giving my cards. You have almost support on everything. And Eclipse, by the way, also you have a lot of plugins you can install, of course. I like in IntelliJ, I like the debugging, the auto completion and refactoring capabilities. A nice one who is using the refactoring very much is Victor Rentea. It's really nice to see him. If you watch one of his talks, is really nice about refactoring, and then you see him using his IDE to refactor. I'm really, it's so nice. So next Monday we have also a talk of him, or workshop webinar. So why are people switching to another IDE? I ask to the people, why are you switching if you are switching? Now, because I like the refactor capabilities in that other IDE. I like the debugging more, the code completion, it have less bugs, that kind of things. I like the user experience. Maven Gradle is better, for example, in NetBeans, they said. I like it there more. The Git version control is terrific. yeah, there are different reasons that people are switching to different IDEs. And for example, we have also a card for NetBeans. They love, for example, the Gradle and the Maven integration. It's working out of the box. You don't need to install a lot of plugins. The support, and of course, the godfather of Java, James Gosling, is a huge fan of it. So it must be good, right? And then you have Visual Studio Code. It's really fast. I really like it. If you click it and start it up, it's lightweight, low resources. Release, they have a lot of releases. But the only thing is you need to install plugins if you want to use Java, for example. The Pokemon I want to catch is this one, Visual Studio Code. Why? I work a lot with front-end repositories because it's fast. A lot of contributors, the memory usage, etc., etc., and also technology radar says, yeah, you just check it, and maybe it's good. So yeah, I'm using IntelliJ because I think that's my IDE, because I really like the code completion and the refactorings and that kind of things. Yeah, of course, you have some weaknesses like every IDE have. I sum it up here. You have Eclipse. You also have Visual Studio Code. You have NetBeans, of course, and you have one card that rule them all. This is the Chuck Norris card. It's everyone has his own Chuck Norris IDE. So everyone has his own IDE that think it's best. But I want to say to those people that don't want to switch, just try it. And yeah, maybe it's better, maybe not, and then you're switching back. In the past, I was using a lot of IDEs, and I switched it to one where I now think it's, hey, that's really nice. Yeah, I think you also should learn. And yeah, the best one is the skill card. You need to know your shortcuts. You need the courage to switch. Just check it out. Maybe it's better, and maybe not, and then you go back. But yeah, learn, and yeah, then it can be very powerful. But blah blah blah. What is the most used IDE? The results. From my perspective, I can also show. I will show you the results also of the voting. What I already thought, a lot of people were using IntelliJ, 72% of you guys, 21% were using Visual Studio Code, some editor, and also NetBeans. Very nice, very nice. And none of them Eclipse. Okay, that's a new one. I'm already, yeah. Who's that advanced editor? Just curious. What are you using then? Like, yeah, just comment it out, I would say. In my research, it was IntelliJ also is used the most. Yeah, you have the community edition. It's the free version of IntelliJ. You have the paid version. A lot of people are using the paid version. So yeah, that's interesting. And also more and more people are using NetBeans. I see it also on talks that people are going to use it more and more. And also Visual Studio Code. But yeah, I'm my network is Visual Studio. My network is about Java developers, so Visual Studio Code is a little bit less. But I also see a change there, that the more and more people are using Visual Studio Code also, because you have a Java plugin down there. And also because of Kotlin, most of you people are using IntelliJ because it's made by JetBrains, and yeah, it's still more than 50%. Also from JetBrains, yeah, by JetBrains they say JetBrains is mostly used, but also at SNCC, for example, they said, hey, IntelliJ is used the most. So I think it must be good then. Yeah, you also see it. It's from 2019. I hope they also have a survey for 2020, but this is from last year. yeah, you can see, hey, people are using more and more IntelliJ, and you don't see even Visual Studio Code yet. So here, so it's, yeah, if we add it there, yeah, it will be very interesting. So to do the list for you guys, catch your Pokemon, catch your IDE, IntelliJ, Eclipse, Visual Studio Code, NetBeans, or Emacs. Just try it and understand it. Understand the shortcuts, the features, and read some books, I would say, ebooks, learn. Train it, install some must-have plugins. Yeah, it must be default almost, I need to know. Like Snick, it's, yeah, I think it's really good, and also for Sonalint and some pair programming possibilities. You see now in the EIP version, it's now default. Yeah, I'm curious if it's also in the next generations of IntelliJ, and install some fun plugins. And evolve your Pokemon. How? By coding and have a lot of fun. So, IntelliJ license, I would say. I hope someone tweeted or just followed, I would say. I will check my phone. I'm just curious. There's some people that following me. I just pick one. Mark Beckers, is he's in? Just shout out in the Q&A. And yeah, please leave a tweet, I would say. Thank you for your attention. Yeah, if you have some questions, this is the time, and I think it's right on time, right? Or just 5 minutes over, sorry.
Yes, thanks very much, Ko. Great
Yeah,
presentation.
see you, yeah, a question, is Mark there? Otherwise,
yeah, Mark is there.
okay, perfect. I will chat you on Twitter, Mark, and you get your free license. Thanks for following and tweet. Thanks. Back to you, Phil.
Yes, congrats, and thanks for the presentation. Let's dive into the questions straight away. So first one from Jochem. Should the whole team work with the same IDE? And if not, which combinations should you advise to use and which doesn't work together?
Yeah, in the past, I would say use the same IDE. It also depends if you're a junior, right? If you're a junior, I would say just use the one the other people are using. Like if you're just beginning, then use the one they use. Like if they're using Eclipse, just use Eclipse. Using IntelliJ, then use IntelliJ. But if you're a senior, for example, yeah, in the past, I would say also use the same. Because yeah, it's very effective to, yeah, if you're switching behind your desktop every time someone else is using your IDE, or yeah, I would say then use the same. But nowadays it doesn't matter anymore because we're all working from home, right? So yeah, you have pair programming plugins which you can use, and install that one, and it doesn't matter which IDE you use. It's all about the code and not about your capabilities of you understanding the IDE. So yeah, it depends. Yeah, if you don't, yeah, it can be both in nowadays. But yeah, I recommend it. Yeah, to use the same one, because then you learn. Yeah, maybe you learn something new, or yeah, something like that. Is that an answer?
Yeah, definitely. If it's junior colleagues you're dealing with, maybe they're more impressionable and you can persuade them to your IDE.
Yeah,
that's the easy way, I guess.
Yeah. And if you're senior, yeah, you can do both, I think.
Yeah. Cool, thanks. Then are you guys using the IntelliJ? Oh, this was a general question, I think. So people answered that already. I think yes, most people were. Yeah, next one. Can sync be used for free?
Oh wait, sync?
Yeah.
I need to check it. Why you guys stop the sharing? Sync? What is sync? Sorry. Oh, Snick. Oh yeah. Oh, I was Snick. I was sorry. Snick. You can. Yeah, I was thinking what is sync, but yeah, Snick. But Snyk you can use for free to check your dependencies, for example, your dependency management. But they offer a lot more, of course, and you can pay for it. Like they have complete solutions to check the vulnerabilities in your code, for example, and not only your dependencies. So, yeah, they offer whole solutions to program better. But this plugin is free, and you can just install it, and it's very powerful. Yeah.
Cool, nice. Do they also have a build? Do they also have a build plugin so you can actually do this in your CI/CD pipeline?
Yeah, they had it, but I think it's paid. I don't know for sure, but it sounds reasonable they do have kind of these things, but not I'm aware of. But yeah, the enterprise edition, I think they have, but then yeah, you need to pay it, and
Yeah.
it must be also very powerful.
Cool. Yeah. Then another one. Just got a new issue of Java Magazine today with comparisons of different collaboration plugins. I guess not a question, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I also have it here. I was just reading it today. I just got it today. It's the NL magazine, and it's also very interesting if people want to read it. It's very powerful. Yeah, it gives you some more insight about the different remote pair programming possibilities. So yeah, definitely you need to watch to read it. So yeah.
Cool. Then I can see one more related to your presentation. Is it go for VI or Vim? What is your preference?
Yeah, my first project was on Solaris, Sun Solaris it was, and I was always using VI. Yeah, it's more or less, it's a little bit similar. I don't know exactly how Vim works, or is it the same even, but yeah, I was a VI user, yeah.
I guess Vim is VI improved, right? So
Yeah.
maybe better.
Yeah, I never use Vim, but yeah, I don't like improved versions, no.
Yeah.
But yeah, VI, yeah.
Then we have what is a Pokemon and Scala. So maybe you can answer those questions.
Pokemon Scala, yeah. I don't know. A functional one, yeah.
Okay. Cool. Then yeah, I think that's all we've got time for, everyone. Thanks very much for joining, and thanks Ko and Sander for your great presentations. There will be a recording link on the Meetup page that will be shared afterwards, and there will also be a survey as well. We really recommend and ask you to fill out the survey so that we can improve the Picnic Meetup in the future, and yeah, bring you guys more great content.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Phil, Sander. Really nice to hear the talk of Sander and you. Thanks.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks very much to you guys.
Bye bye.
See you all.
Enjoy your evening.
Thanks. You too.